Good morning, and welcome to day 147 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. For the rest of this week, we will be doing one chapter a day from the book of Malachi. The corny pastor joke is that it's pronounced Malachi, the Italian prophet. Can't resist. But we'll be doing one chapter a day from Malachi as we wrap up our study of the Old Testament. And Malachi simply means my messenger. Even though this is Malachi speaking, he's speaking on behalf of and giving the words of the Lord directly to his people. And much of Malachi is an implicit conversation where Malachi takes the complaints of the people against God and gives God's perspective or response to those complaints. So, as we've already covered, this is a post-exilic book, and when the people came back from exile, things were not as grand and glorious as they hoped. They had a lot of practical obstacles, and a lot of times they fell into the pattern of blaming things on God and looking to Him for their problems rather than looking at renewing their covenant with Him and living faithfully before Him as their solution. So you get straight out of the gate in the opening verses, a pronouncement, the word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. I have loved you, says the Lord, yet you ask, how have you loved us? And so God establishes that from the very beginning, Israel's existence and Israel's prospering were all a matter of His blessing and His faithfulness, even when Israel, time and time again, had failed to be faithful. And the rest of the book of Malachi is really unpacking that. It's really getting them to look at their present situation differently in light of what they already know or should know from their past. And so you see this starting in verse 6. He says, a son honors his father and a servant his master. But if I am a father, where is my honor? And if I am a master, where is your fear of me? Remember when we looked at the wisdom literature? Again and again, we saw that refrain, that the reverent fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And note, first and foremost, who he holds accountable. He holds accountable their spiritual leaders, the priests themselves. And he says, you ask, how have we despised your name? And God answers, by presenting defiled food on my altars. If you read through the remainder of chapter 1, then you see that when people were bringing their sacrifices, they were not bringing them in accordance with the Mosaic law. They were not bringing the first fruits of their crops and the first fruit of their flocks. They weren't bringing unblemished specimens. They would present something that is sick or lame or already on its deathbed, meat going bad, so to speak. And God asked them in verse 8, He says, when you present a blind animal for sacrifice, is it not wrong? And when you present a lame or sick animal, is it not wrong? Bring that to your governor. Would he be pleased and show you favor? And so God is asking them, you're living your life more in light of realities beyond me than realities centered on me. You're offering me less, not more, than you would offer to someone with whom you have no covenant. And that's a temptation into which we all fall all too often. We saw in Nehemiah chapter 13 yesterday that despite all the recommittal and renewal and rebuilding that they had been doing in Ezra and Nehemiah went back to the heart of the empire only to find that just a few years after he'd left, the people had already gotten off course. They stopped being intentional about putting God at the center, and something or someone else will always take that place when that happens. So God actually makes a reference to a time in Israel's history during King Ahaz, which is referenced in 2 Chronicles 28. And he says, I wish you would shut the doors so that you would no longer kindle a useless fire on my altar. I am not pleased with you, and I will accept no offering from your hands. He's referring to a time when King Ahaz of Israel shut the doors of the temple because he was pursuing and worshiping idols instead. And God says effectively, if you're not taking this seriously, then what's the point? This is the God who tells us, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I would rather have wholehearted obedience than burnt offerings to begin with. So if you bring a burnt offering in lieu of being obedient, and that burnt offering is your leftovers, where is your heart really for God? And again, it comes back to that word sacrifice, to make sacred. It's not that the thing is sacred, it's that it is made sacred when it is offered up to the glory and the worship of the Lord. It is an act of faith and faithfulness that says, everything that I have and everything that I am capable of bringing to anyone starts with what I have received from you, God. And so Malachi has some harsh words that confront us. What are we bringing it to the Lord? Does it truly qualify as a sacrifice? Are we making our whatever, our time, our resources, our abilities sacred by first and foremost offering them up to the praise and glory of God's name? Keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep responding. And we'll see you tomorrow with Malachi chapter 2.